American Goldfields is what I call an old new company. We took this over in 2010, but we didn't actually get control of its principal asset, a small deposit in Mexico, which is about 1.1 million ounces gold equivalent. We didn't get control of it until last December. And how it started out was when we first got control of the company, we actually completely gutted it and replaced all the management and the board of directors, even the law firms. Now we have DLA Piper, one of the top in the world, and we also have Baker McKenzie in Mexico representing us, the ex-attorney general. So it's a completely remade company. It used to be called, some of you may be familiar with it, MXOM Minerals. It's now Pan American Goldfields with a completely new management and a new direction. So, this thing to work. Oh, okay. This is always a surprise. When we took over this company, our first objective was to develop this small deposit, but the reason we were attracted to it was because it has the potential to spin off at today's prices at 100,000 ounces a year, about $90 million a year. So definitely something worth pursuing when you're taking over a company with a valuation of about $10 million. This slide here just is showing the different, was just showing all the discoveries in the last 50 years. But I think the thing that you have to really come around with is that most of these discoveries have occurred within the top 25 meters of cover. In fact, most of them actually start out on the surface. So really, to discover and add to your reserves, you have to go to places where very few people have been before. And unfortunately, there's two dynamics in the resource market right now, if everybody's puzzled by how badly juniors have done. And one of them is the average geologist is around 55 or 58 years old. And the 58-year-old guys don't like sleeping in tents. And they don't like being in the field for 3 months. They want to go home to their family and stay there. So we've got that. The other thing is that most of the areas, like the Maricunga Belt and, most of these big areas, for example, in the middle of the 90s, I was spending a lot of time in the Congo, Kolwezi cobalt deposit. We were at the Lubumbashi for the copper. It was all obvious, and it was all just coming of age. So it was a big bull market then because of all these giant discoveries that were being made. And also, they were being monetized because they were being taken over by big companies. And we haven't had any major takeovers in the last little while, except for perhaps Viceroy by Yamana, which isn't really major. It does tie into us because one of our directors actually put together Viceroy's principal asset. So the third dynamic that's happening is the prices are going up to explore. So even though we raised, I think about $19 billion or more was raised in Canada in 2010, and that's a lot of stock to be absorbed by the market, considering there's been no discoveries and no major takeovers. But the cost of exploration has skyrocketed, so you're not even getting that much bang for your buck. So while that's been happening, so the discovery size has been decreasing, and so has the grade. And you can see here that the grade has been cut in half. This isn't the sort of thing that bull markets are made out of. And at the same time, the majors are having such trouble replacing their production that, for instance, Barrick took over a copper miner in Africa a year and a half ago. So the principal strategy should be to go to where it's cheap to explore for gold, and the finding costs are quite low. And that means Latin America, Africa, but it also means one place that's off the map, and that's Mongolia, and we have extensive experience there. So I have this chart here not just because of Standard Chartered's extensive analysis, which is predicting $5,000 gold, just based on the decline in gold production or new projects. What they've done is look at all the new projects in the pipeline and calculate how much of a shortage there will be on gold. This has no monetary calculations at all. It's just based on 8% growth in China, and growth in Asia continuing to be relatively the same. So that's a pretty good price if you're a gold miner, even though the market certainly isn't reflecting that now. The other thing I have in the bottom was one of our first exploration projects to put in the company. As big as Standard Chartered is, they actually mentioned it in this big gold report as potentially adding to the gold production in South America. And so a little bit of bragging rights for us. So these are all the hot spots in the world right now. You can see China is circled. Well, it should really be a little bit higher and include Mongolia, especially with the Oyu Togo going on. And believe me, there's a lot more potential there. The Russians did not stop mining or did not stop discovering and developing things in Mongolia because they ran out of potential. They stopped because the Soviet Union collapsed. So the main points are the cost of exploration is rising, gold production growth is falling, grade and discovery size is falling, which is why we have a bear market in juniors. And so it's essential for gold explorers to go to underexplored areas with the right geological settings. And it's essential for gold explorers to have fast, efficient, and cost-effective abilities to operate. How we do that, we're tied to one of the largest geological societies in the world. It's Novosibirsk. The head of its geological department is the advisor to our board, and we actually can draw from 670 scientists for 10 cents on the dollar what a Western company would spend. And we've had them in everywhere from Argentina, we've had them in Mexico, we've had them in Colombia, Mongolia. And one good example is for 3 months we had 12 graduate explorationists, graduate students, most of them PhD. They worked for 3 months outlining a large gold zone and sampling all the drainages in the area. And the whole bill was $55,000. And I would challenge a Western company to put together a dozen PhD geologists for 3 months for $55,000. So the potential hotspots are Mongolia, Siberia, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, certainly parts of the Maricunga Belt, and Colombia. So as I mentioned before, we are able to reduce our costs dramatically. We do have these people working for us in different parts of the world all the time. We don't necessarily mention it in our programs because what we will do to save money, before we will even make a deal, we'll send 2 or 3 expert geologists to go and do field mapping and sampling. Often we will send the samples back to Novosibirsk to do everything from petrology to get the assays and other analysis, and they'll do it as a science project, so it won't cost us anything. So, so the other advantage we have also is that our management, and you'll see it in a minute, has found and developed some major mines and companies. In fact, one of our directors is the former president of Barrick Argentina, and under his guidance, the Veladero, Barrick's largest mine, was developed. Our biggest project right now on the high-impact exploration side is Cerro Delta. It's about 12 miles away from the Cerro Casale, and it has very, very similar geology to that discovery. I already mentioned about Dr. Borisenko, and also we have George Young, he's the founder of IRC, which was just bought out by Rural Gold for $700 million, and he co-founded with Peter McGaw Mag Silver. A very dear friend of mine was the founding director of Persis. You may have heard of it. It was a startup 7 or 8 years ago, actually 9 years ago, and it's now doing 250,000 ounces this year, and that's Dr. Alex Becker. So the capital structure right now is we have 71 million shares outstanding, fully diluted, it's 115 million. We changed the domicile from Colorado to Delaware because it's more investor friendly. We changed the transfer agent from an unknown transfer agent to American Stock Transfer. That's the same as Barrick and Franco-Nevada. Management executive owns in options, warrants, and shares 22%. We have a sponsor, Macquarie Private Wealth, Richard Savage, to go on the TSX. There has been a hold-up in this process. We had American articles when we took it over, and that included a poison pill and a staggered board. The TSX does not allow that, so we're in the process of changing those articles, and once they're changed, we'll make our application. We have institutional shareholders of 11%. That's actually not quite right because Hotchinger Bank in December bought 3 million shares, so it's a bit higher than that. And we expect that institutional ownership to keep climbing as we execute. So this map shows basically where we are right now. Our principal project is the Cieneguita, Mexico. To be candid, the Encino Gordo we're likely to sell in the coming weeks. It's really, our Russian team went all over it and found that it just doesn't have the right kind of potential. We're not a company that's going to go looking for 500,000 ounces of gold. We prefer, we found for the same kind of money, if you go in the right areas, you can make a discovery that's a multiple of that, and that's exactly what our model is. Cieneguita, Mexico is our core project, principally because it's a developed 43101 compliant resource in an open pit shell, so a mineable pit shell of 1.1 million ounces gold equivalent. And we are fast tracking that to complete a PEA this summer, and then it would go into feasibility after that. Colombia, we have an advanced project there. We have had our geologists all over it. We are in negotiations to acquire it. The price will have to be right. We're very, very cheap, and we think in this market you should be able to get it for almost nothing. Even though, and by the way, we're the ones with all the data, not the vendors, not anybody else. So we have a big advantage in negotiating. Cerro Delta we do have, and that should be drillable. We actually have the drill holes planned and permitted, and that's planned to be drilled this coming winter. So here we say we have a controlling 80%. We actually control 100%. But what it is the former operator and developers, we allowed them to have the right to earn a 20% interest in the project by paying a 20%, by paying their pro rata share of that 20%. Right now, also as a way to allow them to exit gracefully and make some of the money back that they poured into the project, we allow them to December of this year, so another 7 or 8 months, to mine the first 15 meters. It actually works out to less than 2%, around 2% of the deposit, so it has a negligible effect, and we get 20% of the net profits from that little pilot operation. It's given us a high confidence rate, confidence that we will be successful in our PEA and in our feasibility, because they basically went around and acquired a bunch of used mining equipment and went into production with no engineering at all. And after a year of tinkering around with it, they've managed to keep it at a steady state of production with between 87 and 91% recoveries, which is really, really good. Now, we've got one of the top engineering firms in North America developing this mine now, and I think they can do even better. So this original pit shell was done at $1,475 silver and $950 gold. The actual prices will be used that will be higher than that, so the cutoff grade should be lowered somewhat, and we think it'll increase around 20%. So we'll end up with around 1.3, 1.4 million ounces gold equivalent. In Argentina, this Cerro Delta project is considered a lookalike to the Caspiche. It has a larger gold zone. The entire system is intact, so it has a epithermal cap and then a porphyry underneath. And the real question with it is, will it provide economic grades? Because it's on the same plumbing, the same structure, and it's only 12 miles away from the Casale, which is, again, part of that whole series of giant porphyry discoveries. So this is our management, which I spoke of. I'll go over very quickly because I've already describe them a bit. Hernan Salerio, ex-president of Barrick Argentina, during the Veladero days. He was also, he helped formulate the mining code and law and constitutional protections of mining in Argentina. He was, in fact, he quarterbacked it. And I asked him, and I can, if anybody wants to ask later, to provide me with his critique of what happened in Argentina last week with YPF and how it relates to the mining industry. And for those, just to, the short answer is probably not a lot. It's certainly a concern. It's made it harder for raising money for companies in Argentina, but there's a lot of protections for mining companies in Argentina, and there's a lot of reasons for the government to leave the mining industry alone. He was also director of Northern Orion and Yamana. So those are the only two directorships or director positions I'm aware of him having. And so he's very seriously involved with our company and very helpful. George Young, International Royalty, I mentioned. He also was principal. He acquired Viceroy's principal asset before it was, and it was finally taken over by Yamana. That was the Guacamayo, and he did that when he was the president of Orobel, a subsidiary of Viceroy. Gary Parkinson's developing Chesapeake's Metases. He is the project manager. Chesapeake is one of the few companies that's actually going up right now in this gold market. And he's made two major discoveries in Mexico. He is quarterbacking the development of the Cieneguita. So couldn't have anybody better than him doing it. Randy Buckamer is a takeover specialist. He is well known for taking over and cleaning up the company called Mohawk Oil, and it was the largest independent retailer at the time in Canada, and he turned it around. It was a money-losing company and engineered its listing on the TSX and sale to Li Ka-shing's Husky Oil. I'll just to be a little bit quicker, Miguel Denano, he used to manage Phelps Dodge's operations in that part of the world, and also Hochschild's and BMO, and he's done a considerable amount of consulting work there. Bruno LaBarber is one of our financial people, ex-Morgan Stanley. His partner, his quiet partner, is Pierre Lassonde in this fund. Dr. Alex Becker, I mentioned him before. He worked with Paul Soros on the Apex Silver Mines play. He was managing the exploration of their Central Asian efforts. He actually made a major discovery there. It's about 5.8 million ounces of gold. He also was the founding director of Persis, as I mentioned before. You can read about the other things he's done. Dr. Alexander Borisenko, head of geology and the ore deposit geology at Novosibirsk. He's discovered almost 4 billion ounces of silver. And so he is quarterbacking our efforts in Central Asia, and you're going to see a lot of excitement come out of there, I think, in the fall. Fedor Zemelov is his protege, and he is our chief geologist. So to go back to our core project, which is the bread and butter, it's in the Sierra Madre gold belt. It is a very well-known mining area. You can see all those red dots, different mines in operation. Very little problems mining there. There isn't a lot of people along that belt. It's a pretty underpopulated area. The closest mine to us is the El Suzel, which is owned by Goldcorp. It's about 12 miles away. More than 20 million ounces of gold have been discovered there since 1992, and all in 40 million ounces have been produced. So right now the production, I have 500 tons per day, 1,000 ounces of gold equivalent to September to 2011 to date. That's actually understated. The last month it was about 600 ounces of gold and about, I think it was 36,000 ounces of silver was produced last month, and at the same tonnage. But what we're finding is the grades are coming in higher than expected. So average recoveries, it's showing 86 to 89% gold. That's actually increased. It's more like 87 to 91 for silver and gold. pilot production. It just increases our comfort level that we're going to be successful developing this. Right now, our share of pilot mining revenues is 20%. Our thinking is we will probably have them decommission their activities at the end of the year, but it is an option to negotiate a far better deal, like 50-50, and let them continue mining so we have cash flow. But the most important thing with this deposit for us is to get it to that 100,000 ounces per year, and that can be done relatively quick. Once we finish the PEA, it's about a year and a half to get a feasibility study completed, and then we do the build-out from there. So this is the actual 43101 compliant resource table. You can see we've got 20 million tons, 0.74 grams per ton gold, and 51 grams per ton silver. So very, very nice grades for going into production. Talking to Gary, it's quite conceivable, normal course to have this producing at about a $500 per ounce cash cost. Once again, it was done at much lower gold and silver prices, so as they are recalculated at higher prices, and we tighten up the drilling on this PEA, the actual resource should increase somewhat to about 1.3 million ounces. This just shows you the cross section of the deposit. You can see that it's about 900 meters long and several hundred meters wide. It's the top of a hill. Stripping ratio is very low. Very simple processing with excellent recoveries. The peer group valuation, especially using grade resources, because it's one of the only non-producing companies in our area with a deposit of a similar size. I think there were about 1.7 million ounces. They were taken over at about $218 an ounce by Agnico Eagle, which needed to replace the reserves, and it had an operation in their vicinity. So this is the timeline from M3. They have they estimate that sometime this summer, I would say probably August, they will complete this preliminary economic assessment. It's on schedule as I speak, and I think it'll be a major event for the company. These are the projections. They show various cash flow or price sensitivities. You can see at today's prices, our 80%, and this is assuming that the Mexican partners do earn their 20%, adds up to almost $90 million cash flow. So free cash flow using a $500 production operating costs. So very, very economic. At $1,800 gold and $50 silver, it jumps up to $128 million for our share. So this is why Hernan Celerio, myself, we've all gone to the effort to take this company over and start with this little junior mine. It can really become a cash machine. So our first big high-impact project, and one thing I really want to emphasize, we acquire things that we can acquire cheaply, have huge upside, and we can either kill them or end up with a discovery relatively cheaply. And our Russians think we can spend $1 million on this in the initial round of drilling and know whether we should pursue it or not. And that's pretty cheap. If you look at its analogous deposits in the area, they're all 20+ million ounces. And this actually has a larger gold zone than Kaspishi does. It's about twice the size on surface. So very, very interesting, very, very high impact. You can see Kaspishi, Cerro Casel, and Cerro Delta. They actually run along the same east-west faulting system. It's structurally controlled by some volcanic activity that came through there. And so the same plumbing. It virtually looks identical in the exploding breccias and all the other things you look for as a geologist. This is it's located in La Rioja province in Argentina. When I first saw it, and I knew it was available through Hernan Celerio and Miguel, my first thought was, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Why now? Why wasn't it developed before? And Well, the Maricunga Belt was all the rage, and the Caspice and Casale and Maricunga gold mine was developed by Kinross. This was out of circulation because the province of Rioja would not allow open pit mining. And also there was a problem with the boundaries, so nobody could actually work this because they didn't actually know what the boundaries of the property were. And none of this was reconciled or fixed. First, the government voted 28-1 to allow open pit mining, I think principally because in the very next province of Catamarca, the Baja Alumbrera had been in production since 1999, open pit, and it was just a cash machine for the government of Catamarca. So Rioja, seeing this and seeing it didn't affect the farming at all because it's way up in the Andes, decided after 10 years of watching that maybe they should allow open pit mining in the mountains as well. And so that's what they did. They voted and to allow it. So the next thing that had to be fixed was the boundaries, and that dispute was not reconciled until 2010, the end of 2000, December of 2010, and that's when we acquired it. So we were the first ones to get it. We actually, Miguel de Nano was very close to the vendors, and that's why we have it. So, and that's why it was never ever drilled or developed till now. This just shows the gold anomaly on it. It's actually bigger than advertised. They just simply stopped 10 years ago, I think, in mapping it, because I think they had a big enough gold anomaly, and it was also a porphyry coming to the surface. So you can see a company called Golden Peaks came along, and they did some geophysics on it. The president of Golden Peaks is actually an old friend of mine, so he was the first person I called to ask him why he didn't drill it, and that's where I heard the sad tale of not having the boundaries, so he couldn't drill it. So, but they do have a huge metallic body below that gold zone. You can see here it's on the lower left corner. It's about 800 meters long, and that's can host a tremendous amount of ore. This here just shows the actual trend, and you can see these little hills are the actual porphyry outcrops, and with all the alteration. And so you literally go, that's how big this is. You'd be going for 1, 2, 3. And in the background on the right hand, way over, would be Cerro Casale, all in line. So it's the kind of exploration project you can see from satellite. It's that big. And this is just showing the various, when I say we have the drill holes spotted for this, well, you're looking at them right now. And the roads are in. Everything is ready to go. So the question is, will it be the next big discovery? I don't know. It really is going to depend on the grades that we find when we do drill it. Dr. Borisenko, who is one of the top porphyry specialists in the world, he notes that it looks identical to or nearly identical to all these other major deposits in the Maricunga. And so once again, there'll be a lot of excitement when we start drilling it this winter. And we expect to be on the TSX by that time. Now, just as a parting comparison, here's a bar chart just showing how we look compared to Grade Resources, Kimber, and Paramount. These are companies that are in the immediate vicinity. Paramount does have a Nevada project that's a low-grade, I think, heap leach, which they're just developing as well. So that skews it so much. But even if you were to cut it in half because of that, we are still trading at a very small fraction of what our peers are trading at. And again, that's why we took it over. In terms of valuations, I thought I'd put this in because it's such a tough market, but it just shows that we're about 4 standard deviations from the normal average going back to 1984. So if you're looking at it the way a Hottinger Bank and an old Paris family would look at investments over decades instead of years or months, they've started to accumulate these things. And I was just in Zurich and in London talking to some very old money who are planning to or contemplating financing us, and they're looking at the same way as they're going to re-enter the gold market now. So that when you get to 4 standard deviations away from the norm, it's usually a good time to start thinking about and start picking the right companies. This just shows how the PE ratios. This is from the British Bank Credit Analyst Research. It just shows how low the PEAs, price earnings ratios have gotten. And again, you know, we're at a cyclical low, and it's not because these companies aren't making money. And that's the main thing, is that I think it was Bank of Nova Scotia came out with a study and said that the current cash flow rate for Barrick and all the majors and mid caps, they're going to produce and accumulate more free cash flow by 2015 than the size of the entire sector's market cap. So that's pretty indicative of a bottom to me. So going back to our company and what we're doing about it, we've got a relatively low risk development play. We certainly have the management to execute. We're trading at a fraction of our peer group value for that resource we have. And they are real ounces in the ground, over 100 drill holes to define it. We're very close to a major catalyst and getting that PEA completed. We're close to getting on the TSX. We will probably upgrade the size of the resource because of the low gold prices and silver prices used. We are going to be putting in additional projects, and I think the management speaks to that very, very well. I mean, just George Young alone, his company, International Royalty Corporation, all it did was acquire interest in projects that were budding and looked good. And it went from a startup 6 years ago to being sold for $700 million because he had a good eye for projects. And that's the kind of management you need in this market, especially when it's a tough market. So we will continue to acquire projects on a very economic basis and develop them at a fraction of what most people could do that. So the first catalyst you should look for is getting the scoping study done. Sometime around then, we should also be listing on the TSX. And that's this summer. So the Cerro Delta, Q1 2012, that's supposed to be actually Q4. That's a typo. We will be drilling that then. And of course, the feasibility study would start sometime at the end of this year. So, and then we have, of course, Mongolia. We're waiting for the elections to happen, and then you'll start to see news come out of Mongolia. So here is just a schematic of what all the different things I just talked about. And you can just keep I hope you can all have presentations so you can take this with you. But it is very clear that we have a very coherent plan to upgrade the value of this company. We only just acquired acquired the control of the Sinagita in December, so 4 months ago. And our latest appointment of Hernan Solario only occurred in January. We have one major player joining next week. And we're just getting started. So if you have any questions, thank you very much in the meantime.
We're going to do the Q&A in the breakout room because we ran out of time.
Okay.